Unfortunately, we're going to have to spend some time talking about an ugly stain on the United States Constitution, by far the most disgusting thing in the Constitution, and got to be the biggest mistake made here. We're going to deal with the 3/5 compromise. So this compromise comes as a result of the House of Representatives being added to the government. So this is a problem that arises because of the Virginia plan. So if the Virginia plan says the votes must be based on population, we have a new question to answer. What do we do about people that are held in slavery? Do they count as part of a state's population or do they not? So with voting power in Congress in mind, the states in the South that allow slavery will not agree to a plan that is not going to count any of the people held in slavery as part of a state's population. They want to make sure that those people are counted, even though they're not allowed to participate in government in any way. The states in the South want to make sure that they are counted in order to give those states as much voting power as possible. The northern states, those that did not allow slavery or had much less slavery going on at the time, they refused to ratify a plan that was going to count all of the people that were enslaved as the state's population, because that would mean that the northern states, or the free states, had much less voting power in Congress, and the Congress would be dominated by states that allowed slavery to exist. Just like before, the people that are designing the Constitution have to come up with some plan that both groups can agree on, and that's how we get to the 3/5 compromise. So the 3/5 compromise says that a state's population is going to include all of the people that live there, and it counts 3/5 of all other persons for their population. So the people who are writing the Constitution are very careful to avoid using the term slave or avoid referring to slavery specifically. And so that's why what they say here is all other persons. Everyone knows what that means, but they don't want to put in writing that the people that are enslaved are being counted for population here. So just like any compromise, both sides have to give a little in order to get to a middle ground here. And so this is important for us with the 3/5 compromise. We have to know what went along with this. And so in this case, the slave states in the South demanded that it be added to the Constitution that northern states had to return fugitive slaves, is what they would say. So if people ran away from where they were enslaved and ended up in a free state, those free states in the north had to agree to return those people to the states in which they committed the crime of escaping slavery. Okay, so this is the legal system of the day. What's weird here, you're not going to read that in the Constitution, but what you're going to read still exists today and still potentially impacts all of us. This is called extradition. So if you commit a crime in one state and you run off and you are caught in another state, the state that caught you has an obligation to the original state to return you so that you can be punished. Now, this is in the Constitution because the southern states demanded that people that escaped slavery, that those people were criminals, and that they had to be returned to the state in which they committed the crime, which was escaping slavery. Another very disgusting thing in the Constitution here, but this still exists, right? This is not, it doesn't, just like all other persons, it doesn't specifically refer to people that are enslaved. And so this is still a policy today. If I were to commit a crime in Tennessee and I'm running away from law enforcement here in Tennessee, I'm hiding out in rural Montana, out in the woods, and Montana catches me, they realize, oh, this is Kurt Rakestraw who committed crimes in Tennessee. They must return me to Tennessee so that Tennessee can punish me for this crime. We're going to talk about this a lot later when we talk about the Article 4, what the states must promise each other. Now, in order to agree to this compromise, the free states also have demands of the southern states, and the main thing they want to do is they want to end the Atlantic slave trade. They want to ban the importation of people for slavery. They get this partially. What they get here is a promise that 20 years after the ratification of the Constitution, that no people can be imported to the United States for slavery. So this would stop the slave trade in the United States in 1807, 20 years after the ratification of the Constitution. Now, in history class, you may have learned that, while this is what the free states wanted at the time, this had consequences that were not considered at the time. And what this actually did, the impact of this, was to boost the economic power of large slaveholders in the South, because now those people who were enslaved were much more valuable because of the limited supply of those people. And so this whole situation with the 3/5 compromise is just awful and disgusting and terrible. And what happens here is there is an agreement on how people will be counted in these states, and it's going to have a big time lasting impact on government in the United States. We definitely don't have time to get into all of the problems that are associated with the 3/5 compromise being a part of the Constitution, but I do need to take a minute to remind you of the political impact of these. So because the southern states, the slave-holding states, were allowed to count people held in slavery, what that does is that is going to inflate the population of those states by a tremendous amount. So that means that all of the states that allow slavery are going to dominate voting in the House of Representatives. They have these large populations of people who are not allowed to participate in government in any way, but they're still counted in terms of votes for these wealthy slave owners who are running the government. And so you have a Congress that is dominated by states that allow slavery. And that's going to go on until the Civil War. So for the first 100 years in the United States, Congress is overwhelmingly controlled by representatives from states that allow slavery. Population doesn't only come into play for votes in Congress. Population also has an impact on how many electoral votes you get in the Electoral College. This means that the states that allow slavery are going to get extra votes in the Electoral College. The states that allow slavery have a large number of extra votes in Congress. They also have a large number of extra votes in the Electoral College. What this means is that until the Civil War, until the 13th Amendment gets passed, it's pretty much impossible for Congress to pass laws that would definitely not end, but even limit slavery. It's almost impossible to do so because those slave-holding states have so many votes in Congress. And also, this is going to mean there's never going to be a president elected who is openly hostile to the practice of slavery. You cannot mathematically win the Electoral College without the support of these states that allow slavery because they have extra votes. In fact, if I just go through the first 5 presidents, I've got George Washington, then there's John Adams, he's the weird one, but Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, 4 of the first 5 are from Virginia. So those slave-holding states in the South where slavery is so important, those states have way too much power in the United States government of the first 100 years. Those states can dominate Congress. They can shut down any law that's going to be able to limit slavery in any way. They have control over who the president is. They're not going to allow a president to get elected that is hostile to slavery.